Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Average Intelligence Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jake, and I'm joined this week by our special co host, our special guest co host, Haley of the Part of Your Broadway World podcast. How are you doing, Haley?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm good, but I'm scared. And we'll talk a little bit more about, no, not scared, concerned. I'm strongly concerned.
I'm
Um,
scared.
yeah, it's kind of like you want to run, but you don't know what direction to run in, is kind of the general consensus I feel. But I want to take a moment. This podcast is brought to you in part by our friends at OMG CBD and our good friends at the Spur of the Moment podcast. We'll talk a little bit more about them as we go along. But we're here. I wanted to get your perspective. I'm actually really happy you agreed to come on because I don't think we've ever really had an in-depth conversation politically. I know it's really
Mm,
not your thing. Um, but you've said things a couple of times that I'll be honest, kind of surprised me.
mm.
Um, it's again just assumptions being made. But so I'd like to kind of dig into, and once again, I know it's not your thing, certainly not on your show, but what do you make of this quagmire that we're in politically speaking?
I honestly feel like it's a shit show. It's a shit show.
But like, what makes you say that? What I want to do is I want to understand your perspective a little bit more because you and I come from very very different walks of life and backgrounds,
Mm,
and we have a lot of common ground in our entertainment interests. But
yeah,
politically, I think we're oddly similar, but it's a little bit less surprising coming from me
yeah,
than coming from somebody like you. So
yeah.
dig if you would dig into that a little bit deeper.
Like, I just don't feel like we have good options on either side. Like with Trump, there's the dreaded 2020 Project 2024, which I'm scared of.
Okay, yeah, we'll touch on that in a bit.
Yeah.
I might make you a little bit less afraid of it, but not of
And
the
then
project itself, but the
yeah,
implications. But please
yeah.
go on.
But then with Kamala, her policies don't seem like they have a leg to stand on.
So it's really funny that you put it that way because I'll tackle Kamala first. Some of my more conservative leaning friends are very, very, I don't want to say afraid, but they're concerned about Kamala's proposed policies. But I remind them in order for her to enact any of them, literally anything that she's actually talked about, she would
Mm,
have to have the Democrats would have to control the House and the Senate by a strong majority. And
right.
I don't see that happening. It would have to be the perfect election cycle for them. And even then, like you could say, they're obviously trying to mimic the success of the Obama
Mm,
campaign in 2008. But the thing is, we've gone through that as a society. So now we know that on the other side, not that it was particularly ugly, but it's not as pretty as was promised. So Americans as a general society, maybe some of the younger Americans not so much, but anybody who was alive and or voting during that time remembers when it was like all this hope and the promise of sweeping change, and then 8 years later it's it was more of the shame. It was more of the same. I almost said more of the
right.
shame, but
Or the
that
shit.
that would also be appropriate.
Mm,
Um, which I remind them of that, and then secondly, that even people in the Democratic Party look at Kamala and say, "Listen, we're going to vote for her because we're Democrats and we don't want Trump." But realistically, like practically speaking, none of these things are going to happen anyway
mm,
because Bernie Sanders tried similar things, many many years earlier, and they
mm.
they didn't stick. So that's sort of the how I put it. That's my silver lining if Kamala is elected in
Mm,
2024 is the vast majority of what she's trying to do will not happen because I mean it, the country doesn't have a stomach for it. For
mhm.
example, the whole $25,000. Well, actually, I'm worried that one will happen. Frankly, the whole $25,000 up to $25,000 for first-time home buyers.
Mm.
Anybody who's taken Econ 101 knows, okay, then the cost of homes will just increase by $25,000 and we'll be right back in the same boat we were in, which is probably my biggest thing about Kamala policy wise is the fact that she clearly doesn't understand economics like at all. Like, say what you will about Trump, but at least understands how money works because I mean,
Right, exactly.
I say that somewhat facetiously, but I mean, it's true. Like,
Yeah.
and you can, and some of it's legitimate. You can criticize Trump all you want for nepotism and, being cutthroat and all that, but he still understands how money works. And some of the policies coming from certain Democrats clearly demonstrates that they do not like, and a complete lack of knowledge in history of the world because
Mm,
I was just reminded again during the French Revolution, price controls were one of the first things that they
mm,
implemented, and it was a disaster. And then you look at the Soviet Revolution and Russia, basically any communist regime ever implements
mm,
price controls and people starve and die. They don't work. And the fact that nobody on the Democratic side, because not all Democrats are socialists. In fact, very few of them actually are, and virtually none of them are communists, really communists. Nobody on her side is saying, yeah, no, this isn't. First of all, it won't work, and second of all, it's very much anti. It's kind of anti-American if you think about
mm,
it. Um, but yeah, so here's the thing about Project 2025, switching gears. And I don't blame anyone who is scared of it because the way the Democrats are talking about it, they're acting like it's not only Trump's, policy goal, but like it's gonna happen. Like if Trump's elected, it's gonna happen. Here's the thing about Project 2025. Trump had nothing to do with its writing at all. Some of his former staffers were tapped by the Heritage Foundation to co-write it. Project 2025 is just a wish list from some of the most conservative leaning scholars and thinkers in the United States. And I'm in the middle of reading it now, so I don't want to misrepresent it. So I'm going to speak to what I've seen. A lot of the things in there, as far as how the Democrats are reading it, the biggest problem with it is it's very vaguely written. So, for example, one of the things that it says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but one of the things it says is that, a conservative president should implement policies that strengthen, strengthen and incentivize, you know, the growth of families in the United States. It
mm,
doesn't really say how to do that, but people that are reading it you can spin it by say, oh, so they're going to, they want to push the traditional idea of the nuclear family. So they're going to like outlaw homosexual couples adopting, from adopting children, and they're gonna take away gay marriage. Da, da, da. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that anywhere in there. Now there are some concerning things, but these are the things that, much like Kamala's economic policies in today's
mm.
Congress, they just won't happen.
Right.
It's not going to happen. Like even and I never thought it would. If you'd asked me this in 2006, I never thought I would say
Mm,
this. The vast majority of Republicans are either ambivalent or actually supportive of like gay marriage, for example, as an issue. Like nobody who has any actual power or clout is legitimately trying to get rid of gay marriage, as an example.
mm,
And very few people, there's a handful of crazies on the right that are like trying to make it so that gay couples can't adopt children.
mm,
But again, like it's just so much. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen because you never know. Crazy stuff happens all the time. But so much crazy stuff would have to happen in rapid succession for that
mm,
to actually, and they would be fought every step of the way. Like assuming that a law even got, signed into a bill got signed into law, the ACLU would be over on that in a second. And we saw
yeah.
that not with gay marriage. We saw it with the several abortion laws, for example, that were implemented after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Like the ACLU jumped on the vast majority of them,
Mm,
and they're still
yeah.
fighting it out. And Ohio was one of them, and they jumped on that and actually had it overturned. And now I think it's Ohio that actually amended their constitution, and Florida's trying to do it now
Mm,
to get rid of like the state abortion law. So I guess what I'm really getting at the most basic level is Project 2025 is very much a boogeyman that the people on the left are attacking. Like I don't know if you watch did you watch any of the Democratic National Convention?
No.
They brought up they said Project 2025. I don't even remember anyone actually saying it except poking fun at the Democrats for bringing it
Mm,
up all the time at the Republican National Convention.
mm,
It's not the platform of the Republican Party. It's the Heritage Foundation saying this is what we would love to happen, but they can't actually make it happen.
right, right.
So for the prospective voters out there, all I'm going to say cuz I'm a fan of the truth is Project 2025 is not it's not as bad as they say it is, and even if it was, it ain't happening. It's just not going to happen. Now, certain parts of it, such as, which this is part of it that I actually really like, is they want to change the way, I'm trying to word this properly. They want to make it so the president can more easily fire like the heads of federal agencies. And
Mm-hmm,
they want to change the way legislation is written so that Congress doesn't just pawn off policy and enforcement over to a federal agency, which I'm actually a fan of because I don't like the idea of a bunch of unelected bureaucrats controlling more of my life than even my elected legislatures.
mm-hmm, right.
Not a fan. So, and that's the thing is when you read it, and I actually fault the writers for this, they wrote it so vaguely that if you're reading it, depending on your political, how you swing politically, you'll take vastly different things away from it. Like if you're a really pro union, like person that leans more liberal left, you're going to read that saying, "Oh, the president can fire whoever he wants." It's like, well, that's not really what it says. But it also doesn't distinctly say what it's trying to say, so I can't really
Right.
fault them for that. It's too vaguely worded. Um, but that being said, not to put you on the spot here, I'm not going to ask you who because I think that's very inappropriate. Do you know which way you think you're leaning as far as the election goes?
I don't know anymore because the guy that I was gonna vote for it went to the right. So I'm
Oh, you
like,
were going to vote for RFK too?
yes.
I was. See, here's the problem though. And here's okay, so when RFK I actually think it's a really politically smart move for him doing it the way he's doing because he's still on a lot of ballots, but he's trying to remove himself from the ballot in battleground states. And the reason it's genius is because the way election laws in the United States work is that because Gary Johnson did this in 2012. Yeah. When a third party or independent candidate gets a certain percentage of the popular vote, their party is automatically on the ballot in all 50 states the next election. So if you're not in a battleground state and you can still vote for RFK Jr. and you just can't stand Trump or Kamala, you can still vote for RFK. And at the very least, your vote could go to a third party candidate being on the ballot the following election.
Okay.
Now, if you're in a battleground state like you are, you might be partially screwed
Damn.
because I do point out the fact because I'm a big fan of voting conscience, and I normally do vote third party, normally libertarian, but I'm not like a straight ticket voter at all. So, but I usually do, and every time I say it, people are like, "Oh, you're throwing away your vote." I'm like, "No, I'm not," because when Gary Johnson ran as a libertarian for president in 2012, they got 6% of the popular vote, which is not small, and because of that, in 2016 the libertarians were automatically on the ballot in all 50 states. They didn't have to poll or sue or anything. So it's still worthwhile to do. But you don't have the luxury of living in a state that's like in Indiana, where I am, we're going Trump. Like, we just are. We go red 99.999% of the time. We flipped in '08 for Obama, but that's the last time it happened for a long time. So I can vote my conscience and not really sway the election one way or another,
Mhm.
at least in terms of my state. But you,
I'm
yours
fucked.
your state, well, and to be fair, right now it looks like your state's going blue. It
Yeah.
just does. But it's a toss up, realistically.
Mm,
And between you, me, and the gatepost, all the polling that's coming out showing Kamala like riding this wave, I'm not
mm,
buying it. I'm just not, because
mm,
we've seen this before. We saw this in 2016 with Hillary. Every single major poll said she was going to win in a landslide until she didn't.
mm.
Everyone on the news was laughing at the prospect of Trump winning an election. It's like you just don't know. And the way things are economically right now, and this is why I still maintain that if it was Trump Biden, Trump was going to cream him, because
Mm,
you now have 4 years under each president, and particularly economically speaking, there's just no argument.
mm.
Like you cannot tell me that the Biden economy is better than the Trump economy with a straight
Right.
face.
Right.
It's just objectively not true. And what I always do is, see, that sucks. I was hoping you would disagree with me, but it's just, that's what I mean. It's just objectively not true.
See, this exact thing happened when I interviewed Justin like months ago for the My Fair Lady episode. Is he thought I was going to disagree with him, and then I ended up, and he's like, "Damn it! I thought I was gonna throw you were gonna throw me a curveball and disagree with me," and I'm like, "Nope."
No, because I mean, it's just, and the thing of it is, and I've said this before, and you may not know this, I've actually never voted for a Republican in a presidential election ever.
Neither have
I've
I.
I've voted Democrat once and third party all the other times.
Mhm.
Um, but what I'm getting at, I made the joke when it was happening. Biden's economy and economic policy was so bad that under his watch, Dollar Tree became $1.25 tree. Like the store Dollar Tree had a 25% rate of inflation.
That's insane.
It really is. And I don't know, like McDonald's had the dollar any size drinks for, I think, like close to a decade until the inflation set in, and then they got right rid of that. Unless, did they not do that in Michigan?
I don't know. I can't. I don't really know if we do that here.
They don't anymore. I mean,
No,
prior
they don't
to,
anymore, but like I don't know if they did or not.
it did vary a bit by location, but for the vast majority, yeah, that was the thing that was happening 4 years. That was pre-Trump even. Like that
Yeah.
wasn't something that started under Trump.
We've been in inflation for so long, I don't even know when it started.
Realistically, it started.
like like did it start under Trump or did it start under Biden?
No. Okay, so here, and this is going to prove that I'm not, or at least I try not to be biased. So it started hiking heavily under Biden, but part of that was the Trump spending. But under Biden, it got to 9%,
Okay.
which is just 8 or 9%. But pardon the expression, that's fucking insane.
It is.
At 8%, that's four times what the Federal Reserve aims for. Federal Reserve tries to keep it about 2% inflation.
See, and here's my thing too, is if Trump gets in office, I'm worried it will still go up.
Well, it is. So to be fair, inflation is going down, but it's still higher than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I'll be perfectly frank. Just looking at proposals, um, inflation will go down under Trump unless he just does something insane.
Stupid.
But based upon Trump's first term, I don't see that happening. In fact, I see inflation going down because under Trump's peak inflation rate, as far as how good it was, I think was like,
Mhm.
I want to say, was it at one point? I think it was 1.6%, so slightly under the Fed's, projected. I don't
Yep.
think it ever got above 2% until COVID, and I think that was after Trump left office too. I'd have to check the numbers. But it was low. Like, I mean, you remember the Trump
Mhm.
years. It wasn't that long ago. Like, it was scary in some ways, but in other ways, it was really good economically
Mhm.
speaking.
Mhm. I think my problem with Trump at the beginning was just because I knew him from I knew him from uh oh my God, Home Alone. And like I was like, what the hell? Like an actor can't be president. What the heck? And I'm like,
Ronald
so
Reagan.
oh well, yeah, true. Damn it.
Which a lot of people, and I see why, a lot of Republicans viewed Trump as kind of like the second coming of Reagan, and that was just a fun little similarity, is the fact that Reagan was an actor and then Trump was a television
Yeah.
personality. And a lot of Trump's policies were very Reagan-esque. Some were even a little bit more aggressive. A lot of people like the dog on Reaganomics, but I mean, here's the thing though. If you actually look at the results and try not to skew it, because bad things happen in every economy, it's worth noting that during the Reagan years, I think 7 of the 8 Reagan years, GDP was at 3.6%, and before and after him, it was roughly 2.7, which
Mhm.
doesn't sound like a huge boost, but that's quite big. I mean, that's why you had the economic boom in the 80s.
Mhm.
That's when the
Right.
Wall Street mogul became like a cliche because there was just so much money being thrown around in the economy. And granted, there were some issues afterwards. Some of it, here's the thing about Reaganomics. It's like I understand the philosophy, but you forget that human beings are kind of inherently greedy. So yes, there's going to be some of the ultra rich that are going to take those, tax incentives
Mhm.
and breaks and just hoard it. But there's
Mhm.
a lot more that I'll take my business for example. I would love to hire more people. I would love to. You got to see the taxes we pay. It's obscene. Just how much and how often we're taxed as a small business. Um, I can tell you if the Trump corporate tax rate comes through, I'll be able to hire at least one more person.
Mhm.
I've done the numbers. I've looked at it. Like because that's an annual salary and it's a decent annual salary for somebody with the money I'd be saving under the Trump tax plan, the proposed corporate tax rate and tax cuts.
Mhm.
So that's not nothing, you know. And at the same time, the Democrats just have a tendency to view everybody with wealth as just evil,
Mhm.
and that's just demonstrably not true. The vast majority of people with wealth are actually really, really good people who donate a ton of that money when they can. And not only that, they create jobs, they build new industries, they make new products that we all use and love. Um, you know, iPhone,
Right.
for example. And when Kamala says she wants to implement, price, not price controls, I'm sorry, anti-price gouging legislation, first of all, the grocery store chains and the food makers are not price gouging. That's not the issue. The issue is inflation. Like, if they were price gouging, you would have seen like the cost of bread and bread alone go up from one company. Or maybe all the bread companies would get together and just decide that they were going to raise their prices 50%.
Right.
That would be price gouging and only in certain areas. Like, but when every single item in the grocery store increases by 20 to 30%,
Mhm.
that's not price gouging. And then what's really fun is when you look at the actual profit and loss statements from a lot of these companies, their margins are awful. I don't know why they do it.
Yeah.
Even in good years, they're a lot of them are actually in the red right now. Like they're losing money right now, but they can't stop producing the food because that would be an economic catastrophe. Could you imagine if, say, like Tyson just decided to stop making food, just close its doors? That would wreck the economies of basically every single state, not to mention drive the cost of food up because of how much they produce. No,
Right.
it would be a disaster.
I mean, yes and no, like, but I'm just saying this in a pure standpoint. I hate Tyson.
Okay, Tyson's probably a bad example. I can't think of
Tyson's
another.
food is shit.
Yeah, Tyson's probably a bad example. But if they just decided to quit cold turkey, haha, um, it would be very, very bad. Now, if a competitor came along and was able to kind of like push them out of the market, that would be great. But the consumer doesn't suffer at that point, and neither does the overall economy. Like there's some people would. That's the same thing. Same thing happens anytime there's an industry change. It's like when, the people that were breeding horses were very pissed at Henry Ford initially.
Mhm.
But that was also a gradual change. Like not everybody went out and bought a car the same day. It was a very gradual
Right.
changing the way of the world.
Mhm.
But yeah, so let's just dig into it. Let's dig into the meat. What do you hate about Trump? Like what? Why I shouldn't say hate. What do you dislike about Trump? You're like, where
He's,
to begin? How much time you
yeah.
got?
The show's only an hour, it's fine. But like, uh, well, one thing I don't like is I understand where he comes from with the whole abortion thing. Like
Okay.
with like up to a certain point, you can't get an abortion, which he because I heard rumors too that he said like people are getting abortions up till birth and everything and
So I can actually speak to that. I've never heard of an actual case of that happening. However, I know what
Mhm,
he's referencing, and he definitely should have said it a different way. There are some laws, I believe I need to actually read the law that's being proposed in Florida,
mhm,
but I did read one. I don't remember if it passed even, but it was at least proposed in California, where again, it's a vague language thing. The problem with vague language in a law is that
right,
then it becomes open to interpretation. And the way I read it, it doesn't really have a restriction on timeline.
right,
So if I'm remembering correctly, so I'm going to use this as a hypothetical. Let's
right,
say you have an abortion law in place that enshrines abortion as a human right in the state of California, but it doesn't lay out any parameters, then theoretically speaking, legally, you could theoretically abort a pregnancy up to, and depending on how it's worded, including the moment of birth. It depends on how it's written. Um, So that's kind of what he's talking about, at least in
right,
theory, in some laws. But
right.
and this is the point I always make with pro-life Republicans, is I say, listen, I think we can all agree that the vast majority, because you always have to allot for crazy and weird people, the vast majority of Americans all agree that nobody should be getting an abortion at month 9. Like,
No, no,
by
and
by by that point, I don't think anybody is realistically proposing that.
right, exactly. And I also don't think that a sane human being would do that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I would agree with that. Which actually, this surprises a lot of people. I was actually okay with Roe v. Wade as a sort of standard because when it comes to abortion, there's a giant question mark that realistically needs to be answered before we can effectively have a policy on abortion. And that question is, at what point is a fetus considered a human life? And I don't know the answer to that question. And frankly, neither does anybody else. There's a lot of opinion, but really the only scientific standard, which is what Roe v. Wade was basically operating upon, is viability of the fetus outside the womb with, I would say, reasonable assistance, meaning that like if you were like, I think premature birth is a great standard because if a baby is born premature and it can live with some life support outside, I would call that viable
Yeah.
in my opinion. So I think that was roughly the standard that Roe was operating under, with some latitude in the middle. Um, Depending on like medical needs and doctor and and that those kinds of things. So I was actually a fan of it. Well, not I shouldn't say a fan, but I was okay with it as a standard.
I mean, yes, but and this is my opinion, is I'm trying to figure out a way to word this. Like we talked about, like the wordage was kind of lost a little bit in
Hmm.
translation.
In
Um,
in Roe or with Trump.
in Roe and Trump,
Yeah, I mean I'll be the first. It's not perfect, but it was the standard for a few decades. So
right?
because what the decision came down in the 70s, I believe.
I
Yeah,
believe so.
so 50 some odd years it was
Yeah.
the standard, and it seemed to, I'm not going to say it worked, but it seemed to be the best alternative absent of a better one, you know?
Maybe it's just because I'm a woman, but I just don't like a man telling me like,
Well, there's that too, but here's the problem. So I used to be pretty staunchly pro-choice, not for any real idealistic reasons, but kind of for that. It's like, who am I to tell somebody what to do with their body? But then I was listening to Ben Shapiro talk one day and he brought up the Constitution and I went, fuck, he's got a point. I don't know if he's right, but it's a point that I can wrap my head around. The Constitution guarantees the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
right.
So if that fetus is considered a human, they are technically legally protected under the Constitution. So
Mm,
that's when I'm like, shit, now I have to start thinking about this again. So that's why I always go back to that fundamental question needs to be answered. And the really sad part is I don't think we're scientifically equipped to answer that question.
right.
Not yet. So in the absence of being able to answer that question, for me, the question then becomes, okay, I think trying to decide this morally is not feasible right now. So now the question becomes, does the state have the authority to mandate this?
Right.
That's a much easier question to answer because
Mm-hmm.
then I think then you start implementing standards. And I still want to have a conversation with Eric on this when he gets back because Eric's very pro-life, like very pro-life, and I enjoy debating him because he's pro-life, but it never breaks down to a shouting match because I'm just like, I don't know about that, and here's
Right.
why. Um, but I think I think the vast majority of people can agree that certain standards would be easy enough to implement. Which again, most of these were codified in Roe v. Wade. So I actually laughed though during. I'm gonna draw those blinds. There's sun coming in directly on my face and making me look like I'm worshiping or something. That did absolutely nothing. Okay. I really just didn't think to close the door. It's hilarious. Anyway, um, but I was saying, I was laughing during the Republican primary a bit, chuckling, not laughing, but every Republican on stage is talking about like mostly agreeing on like a federal ban of abortion on like 15 weeks, and I'm just like, that's everything you're talking about was Roe v. Wade. Like literally everything, particularly
Right.
um I'm drawing a blank on her name. I keep wanting to say Tulsi Gabbard, but it wasn't Tulsi. Who is it? Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley in particular was up there talking about like proposed abortion policy, and I'm like, you're literally talking about Roe versus Wade, which all of you are cheering the repeal of, but you're all talking about implementing Roe v. Wade again.
Right. Right. Exactly.
But I did a video, and boy, did I get a lot of hate comments on that. It was a clip from a podcast where I actually called them all out. I said, all of you are not pro-life, at least in terms of the way you're acting, which
Mm,
just from a philosophical standpoint, if you're pro-life, like by definition, textbook definition, you should be anti-abortion, period.
mm,
And none of you are because you're all talking about policies and exceptions and timelines and all this.
mm.
So it's like, I don't know. I called them out and boy, did I get a lot of hate comments, but it's okay.
There's a lot of things that don't make sense for the government lately with the whole TikTok ban thing gonna go through and everything. That
My
doesn't make sense.
my favorite thing in the whole world was when Biden was still in the race. when it was Biden Harris HQ on TikTok, which I followed them because of this. Every post, so many people were commenting like, "What app is this?" And I'm just like, yeah, the hypocrisy. I mean, don't get me wrong, every politician's a hypocrite to a certain extent, but the
Mm,
hypocrisy of today's Democratic Party is just astounding. It's
mm.
just astounding. Like I've been pointing out to a lot of hate the fact that the Democrats have been saying that Trump will be the death of democracy, and yet you have Kamala Harris, who has never received a primary vote from anyone ever in terms of for running as president of the United States, and yet somehow she is the Democratic Party's nominee for president in 2024 after never
That well,
receiving a single
well, that's
primary vote.
because Biden need to go take a nap.
Actually, one of my favorite things, because I do enjoy Ben Shapiro a lot. Don't agree. In fact, I called him out for getting a lot of things wrong in his expose of Kamala Harris, which I equated to the political expose equivalent of the Hobbit trilogy, in that it could have been done in one episode instead of three, and it was mostly bad. But um, my favorite thing recently of his, when Biden was still in the running, he would just always be like, "Where is he? Do we have a president?" He's like, "He has had a clear schedule for 2 weeks. Where is he?" And in fact, when he first dropped out, he was like, "Is he alive?" Because nobody's talked, nobody's seen him. Just like, oh God, what if
You
he
could,
did die?
and you could tell even when he was running during the debates that the man's not well.
But that's just it. That's what I mean. That's my broader point about the hypocrisy of the left. So you had Biden and everyone in the Democratic Party, in the news media, everyone was talking about how, you know, vibrant and sharp he was. And it was just demonstrably not true. I mean, and I always poke fun at what is going on with my camera. Oh no, what are you doing? Okay, there we go. Maybe I fixed it. I've been having a lot of technology issues lately. I don't know why. I think I need to upgrade. But yeah, okay. What was this? Oh, okay. So you had yeah, Joe Biden was under investigation for classified documents, a la Trump. More on that in a moment. And the Department of Justice basically came out and said, "We're not going to press charges because he's a senile old man who means well." And on the same day, Haley, the same day, Biden comes out and does a press conference to show that he is in fact not senile. And in said press conference proceeds to mix up the name of two world leaders and forget, after he brings it up, mind you, because I don't, I have to be careful how I bring this up, because apparently during his line of questioning, his son Bo was brought up, and in the past, Biden has forgotten details about his son's death and all this, or at least
Mm,
he seemed to have forgotten details, which I kind of hate to bring up because it feels shitty. In this press conference, Biden brought it up and he started sharing a story about a rosary that they got, but then he couldn't remember where they got the rosary, and literally something to the effect of like, and we got it at anyway, and then just moves on. And it's like, and then the debate happened, which surprised no one.
no.
Actually, it did surprise me because I made a prediction. I said that he was going to be good for 10 minutes and then slowly start to deteriorate. No, 4 minutes in, he just shut down. Like
Mm,
system restart. And there were a couple of moments when he wasn't talking where he just was staring at the floor like he was zoned out.
mm, mm,
And that was painful to watch. But speaking of the hypocrisy of the left, so everything that they have accused Trump of doing, that they have done themselves. And I can
mm,
point to every instance. So, the classified documents, granted, Trump's thing is a little bit worse, but then it came out. You had a federal judge, which, fair enough, was a Trump appointee, but pointed out that the fact that the special prosecutor constitutionally couldn't have been made a special prosecutor, so any of the
Mhm.
cases that he levied are automatically dismissed, constitutionally speaking. And then he Jack Kirby comes out and tries to re-sue under the same charges. It's like they're gonna get thrown out, dude. Um, but the classified documents, Joe Biden had the same thing. Arguably worse though, because some of his documents were from when he was a senator and he had zero authority to have. Trump is incorrect, but at least there's a legal argument that they're making where it's like, okay, we have to at least look at this and explain to him why he's wrong. But there's
Mhm.
a like senators just flat out can't do that and stuff that he had when he was vice president. Yeah, so there's that. And then the RICO case against him is just especially juicy because this happened in the same jurisdiction even. So the state Georgia case against him where it was basically an election conspiracy, which I will say this much, if the allegations are true, Trump definitely broke the law. If the allegations are true. Like
Mhm.
he broke a lot of laws. But so they're suing him under RICO, meaning there's a conspiracy to either make money or get political gain under the Georgia statute. And then the Georgia district attorney hired her then now ex-boyfriend to be on the case, paid him double what the other attorneys were making, and then they would take vacations together and she would, and I quote, reimburse him in cash. And when asked if she could provide proof of payment, she said, well, cash is fungible. Here's the thing. If I make a purchase and the IRS asks me, hey, where's the proof of payment for this? And I can't provide it for them, that's not good enough for them. Like, I'm still in trouble. But somehow she got away. Well, she didn't get away with it. She ended up having, he either had her ex boyfriend either had to resign or he was going to be removed from the case. But so they're suing Trump for a conspiracy, and then the prosecutor legitimately has a conspiracy. I laughed. I couldn't. And then the whole hush money thing, which, yeah, Trump did it, but Bill Clinton did it.
Mhm.
Bill
Well,
Clinton lied
yeah,
on Bill Clinton lied under oath about it.
yeah, yeah. I kind of forgot about that. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Anthony Weiner, um, Joe Biden has allegations. There's no proof of payoff, but there are allegations there, so that's almost not even. Um, a lot of politicians, have sex with people and pay them hush money. The hush money payment was not actually illegal. It
Mm.
was the alleged campaign finance uses, and then it morphed into this weird New York statute, which is a misdemeanor unless you can tie it to another crime. But apparently, the way they interpreted it, you don't have to identify the other crime that was joined to it. It was weird. It was very weird. Like, don't get me wrong, Trump absolutely did it. I have zero doubt in
Yep.
my mind, but it wasn't illegal. It was dubious. It was morally dubious, but it was not illegal. It was not a crime. But yeah, so
So then
I
I
don't know.
ask you that. So then I ask you then, do you think do you think that he will go to jail?
No.
No.
No, because I think virtually every case is going to be
Mm.
thrown out or he'll be acquitted.
All
So the
right.
thing, the New York one, okay, I forgot about the New York one, so I'm going to change my answer. I'll be honest, it kind of depends on the political climate at the time. So yeah, I'm going to change my answer. He might, because he's supposed to be sentenced on September 18th
Yep.
for that. The thing of it is, the judge is a known Democratic donor. His
Mm.
daughter works for I don't remember if it was the blue. She works for a Democratic fundraising organization, which I think should be thrown out for mistrial, but I don't live in New York and I'm not a judge, so I can't do that. But this judge is obviously very anti-Trump, so maybe. But if that happens, I don't think you've ever seen a larger case of political backed lawfare ever in the history of the United States.
Right.
because here's the thing. They need to consider optics for this. What they should do is they should postpone sentencing until after the election. That's what
Hmm.
they should do at the very least. Because I don't think that case should have been brought up against him at all. But if you're going to do it, sentencing should be with actually any further action in the cases should be held off until after the election, if for no other purpose that it doesn't look like you're sicking the law on a political opponent.
Hmm.
But that's the
Right.
hubris of the left because the thing is, they keep saying the quiet parts out loud. Like, you had Letitia James, who ran for district attorney in New York, specifically saying, or not New York, where's Letitia James at? Alvin Bragg is the DA in New York, ran for that office under the promise that he was going to prosecute Donald Trump. And I'm like, yeah, you can't tell me that's not persecution of a political rival. Like, that's textbook definition. That's like running for a governmental position saying you're going to overthrow the regime. It's the same thing. It's even worse because you're citing an individual. So yeah, optically speaking, that's what I think they should do. And then if Trump does win the presidency, he can pardon himself for everything except for the Georgia case. And
Right.
I mean, at that point, that would be not good politically. And plus, the governor of Georgia is a Republican anyway, so he could just pardon him,
Mm.
which is probably what will happen inevitably because I've read that Trump is mending the fences with Brian Kemp, who's the governor of Georgia. So, I mean, he can't do anything until the case is decided. But if Trump's convicted in Georgia, he could just pardon him. Might not look very good optically for Brian Kemp, but if Trump's the president, that might be a must do. I don't know. It just depends. But the Florida case got thrown out. Um, and then the E. Jean Carroll case was a civil case, so that doesn't have anything to do with Trump going to jail or not. Just has to do with him
Mhm.
paying a lot of money. And then he had one more.
Right.
He had another civil case in New York where they're both those cases illustrated to me that they were just trying to bankrupt him. Because here's the thing: even if Trump were liable, and I don't think he was, certainly not for the real estate one. Um, the fines imposed are just well and above the norm, like hugely above the norm, even for a multimillionaire. And in fact, what's his Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank was talking about it. He was like, "You guys may have just done irreversible harm to the New York economy because what you've told people that do business in New York is that now for a financial misdemeanor, you could be looking at hundreds of millions in fines." So it's not that they're going to stop doing it; they're just going to leave. And the thing of it is, what Trump was charged with could very well have been a financial mistake, not like nefarious behavior. Like something got miscategorized as an expense at the end of the day. That's possibly what it could have been. So it's kind of like, and really, you're telling me with a straight face that Democrats don't misuse campaign funds too? Like, seriously? You're
No,
gonna
I
tell me?
agree 100% with you. I agree
Yeah,
100% with you. Like Republicans are bad, but like Democrats are like notoriously maybe worse.
they're all bad. It depends on the politician, right? But
Yeah.
the thing is, they're all bad. And what I
Yeah.
love, though, is Kamala Harris out here saying that she doesn't take money from super PACs. Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. You just did. You literally just did. Like, you know that $90 million that they
Mm.
shifted from Biden to you? That was a super PAC.
I was about to mention that actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
you absolutely do.
I also wanted to mention this. I don't know if you've been watching all her campaign shit that she's
I've
done.
seen a lot of it. I've seen a lot of it.
Have you ever noticed that like there's some times where she would slip into an accent, like an Obama-esque
She
ass
didn't
accent?
slip in. She didn't slip into it. That's 100% on purpose. Hillary Clinton did it too. Different kind of accent, but oh yeah, what was the one she did? This is my favorite. It was like, girl, you know I'm in these streets. I'm like, you don't talk like that ever. You never talk like, at least not in public. That may very well be how she speaks at home, but her,
And I don't know if this is true, if my mind was just playing tricks on me or something, but like I kept hearing her slip in and out of it too. Like,
Probably that tells me that it's probably not her normal vernacular.
yeah.
It's an act, and I will say I don't like the whole routine of like, well, Kamala's black when it's convenient, but they're saying it because I'm not going to say there's a hint of truth to it, but there does appear to be a pattern of Kamala identifying, which she does have Afro Caribbean ancestry. So I'm not saying she's not black. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that she has a habit of highlighting her ancestry of choice depending upon what environment she's in.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fair because she is biracial. It's whatever. I don't really care much about that because I despise identity politics. It's just ironic because many people on the left seem to be solely focused on the identity politics of a particular candidate. But then when somebody criticizes it, they're like, that's racist. It's like, well, you guys brought it up. I mean, you guys were really the first ones to draw attention to this.
I mean, yeah, true.
So, but again, much like the Obama birthing thing, I'm just like, guys, come on, you're better than this. You're better than this. There's plenty to criticize her about. You don't have to call her out for not being black enough. But then when she fronts an accent, it's kind of hard not to. So I get it. I get the mentality. Um, I don't know if you saw RFK, and I know her name, and I'm just spacing on it. RFK's former running mate financed an ad, a Trump derangement syndrome political ad. It is fucking hilarious.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's so. I'll find it and send it to you. It is
Yeah, send it to
so
me.
funny. It is so funny because it mimics like a pharmaceutical commercial, and the drug in this commercial is independent, and it's like independent might cause an increase in critical thinking skills. It's great. It's so funny. Um, but yeah. What were your thoughts about RFK dropping out, endorsing Trump, and also Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat, doing the same recently? I think just a few days after RFK.
I got sad when RFK dropped out. I got really sad. I was like, no, now I can't vote for anybody. Like
Okay,
this
that's the question I want to ask you. What attracted you to RFK? Because I'm curious about that.
because unlike Trump and unlike Kamala and Biden,
Oh, by the way, I'm just gonna correct you. You can't pronounce it that way. It's racist. That's what they're
is
saying.
it Kamala or is it
Kamala.
Kamala?
You have
Okay,
to pronounce, even though people of color at the DNC mispronounced it. Apparently, if you say Kamala, it's racist. It's Kamala.
that's so weird. I've heard it. I've never heard it. Well, no, I've heard it both ways. Okay. But yeah, both of those, both Trump and whatever. Kamala. Like, I hate it. Like that we have no good president. We have no good people to run, and like both of those, Trump, the Republican and the Democrats, they're both corrupt, at least to me.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
I think, in my opinion, RFK is like just right down the fair middle. That's why I like him.
And that's very fair. That's very much a similar opinion I had of him. But what really attracted, see, here's the funny thing about RFK. This is going back a ways. I first dismissed him as a nutcase because that's what the media was saying. But then I heard him, I heard him on a podcast, and I heard him talk for about an hour and a half. And by the end of the hour and a half, I'm like, this guy's not crazy at all. Like he's a little kooky in some ways, but he's not crazy.
Right.
Yeah, I was checking if you could
Not
still hear me.
no, I still hear yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No.
And then I haven't read his book yet, The Real Dr. Fauci. I'm kind of scared to read it because I've heard some of the things that are alleged in it, and I'm just over here. I'm like, if half the crap in this book is true, I'm just gonna be sick to my stomach. Like, it's just I will lose all hope. So I'm not looking forward to reading it, but I feel like I must. And I'm actually I'm encouraged though because from what I understand, sort of the agreement is RFK is going to drop out and endorse Trump in
Mhm.
exchange for a position in his cabinet should he win the election. And
Right.
I have a feeling he'll be put in charge of things like agriculture or be in a position like maybe he's going to be made head of the FDA or the CDC or something along
Hmm.
those lines. And I'm all for that shit. I want
Right.
RFK to tear that sucker down.
That just reminded me of something too. Like there was this video, and I have to find it and send it to you later if I can find it. Uh, but there was a video that said like, well, come, RFK only is endorsing Trump and getting us a job at that a job there because he asked the Democrats for a job and they said no.
They didn't even, from my understanding, they didn't even say no. They refused to even talk to him.
Really?
Yeah, apparently he reached out to the Kamala campaign. And here's the another reason I really like RFK is this move that he's just made really does strike me as a move from a person who really doesn't care about being president per se. He cares about accomplishing the goals that he has, and his major goal is he wants to end the chronic disease
Right.
epidemic in the United States, and that really comes down to food and pharmaceuticals. And he
Right.
wants to and obviously certain types of pollutions as well, which RFK's career is made off of that. And I'm just like, let this man cook. And Trump, I will say, Trump is the kind of person that, based on what I've seen, will just get out of his way
Mm.
and let him do his thing. So in that, I'm hopeful. Um, yeah, I gotta say, and it might be. I'm not really scared of a second Trump presidency because when you get out of the fear mongering echo chamber and look at the Trump years, did anything bad, and this is a legitimate question because I might be out of the loop on certain things, did anything bad really happen to any particular minority group? Like, really, when you get down to it? I mean, was anybody really denied major rights? I know there was a whole kerfluffle about trans people serving in the military, but
There is that. And then I think like this more recent one that he said if he comes back in, like, um, he was gonna still do that too.
here's the thing about this, and I'm going to word this carefully because I don't want to screw that up. If I were president, I'd have zero issue with transgender people serving in the military. However, there is a question when it comes to two areas. One is, which this is a question anyway, in terms of insurance and state-sponsored insurance in the Army and stuff like that, is elective medical procedures and what's considered elective, what's considered medically necessary, those kinds
Right.
of things. And primarily, who is going to be in a combat zone, like an active fighting combat zone. There could potentially be, and a potential issue is not necessarily enough to dissuade something from happening. I'm just saying there are conversations that would need to be had. If someone is on, replacement hormones in a combat zone, that could potentially lead to some really, really bad situations going down.
Right.
I'm not saying that should definitively be the case. I'm saying that
Right.
there should be some exploration. There should be some conversation, some exploration there. And then at the end, after seeing all the data, then you make an informed decision. I think Trump may have jumped the gun a little bit there, but I also
Yeah.
wasn't in the room.
And then there was talk about like trans men and women in like sports and everything, which I at first I was like, what doesn't make sense, but now thinking about it, I'm like, yeah,
It kind of depends, which I find that you'll appreciate the humor in this. Um, so I'm a pro wrestling fan, have a pro wrestling podcast. In All Elite Wrestling, there is a wrestler named Nyla Rose who is actually a transgender woman. And pro wrestling is like the only sport because it's not real. It's a cooperative performance where because and this is what kills me is they have intergender matches all the time in pro wrestling. And yet there are still people that are like Nyla Rose shouldn't be in the ring with women. I'm like, it's pro wrestling, people. It ain't fucking real. It's
Well, because
not real. This is like
no,
one of the few areas where there is no discussion. This is fine. There's no problem.
and it's like too like my I was talking to a family member and they were like, well, I don't think trans men should be in sports because like in or no yeah trans men shouldn't be in sports because they're stronger, like the men are stronger than the woman, so it's like
I mean, so here's the thing. And actually, Jordan Peterson illustrates this. Honestly, pound per pound on average, like men might have a slight edge. But the thing of it is, especially when you get into areas like professional athletics or the Olympics, at the poles of a given spectrum, those are the extremes.
right.
So yeah, like let's take I mean, this is a good example because of the Fallon Fox incident. So let's take into account something like mixed martial arts. At the top tier, those men are pretty significantly stronger and faster than the women of kind of like equal standing in their division. So when you
Mhm.
have somebody like Fallon Fox comes along who was born, I don't remember when Fallon Fox transitioned, but it well into adulthood after having two children.
Right.
Um, I could see that as a problem. However, it's also worth noting that Fallon Fox was beaten later by a biological woman. So, but it's also worth noting that Fallon Fox, when Fallon Fox was competing as a man, he was like, I mean, abysmally bad. Like, I think like number in the 200s somewhere. Like, was not doing good. Kind of similar to the whole Leah Thomas argument.
Mhm.
Like when Leah Thomas was competing in the men's swimming divisions, they were like, you know, or like just mediocre at best. And then Leah transitions, and all of a sudden, breaking records left, right, and center.
Right.
So,
But then and then you have like one of my family members also saying, well, and they also shouldn't be using the same bathroom. It's like I
okay, so I have kind of an interesting perspective on that. I think the big issue with that is honestly the insistence on policy because
yeah.
at the end of the day, right? This is the way I look at it. No woman ever wants to use the men's bathroom by choice
Right.
because it's not a good show.
No.
And I would make the case that a male presenting individual walking into a women's bathroom will make the vast majority of people uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
So the only thing that changes are you have a fringe group of individuals that for whatever reason want to use that particular bathroom.
Mhm.
I think if they were just not insistent on making it policy, nobody would give a shit.
Right.
Because
No, I agree.
because if you have a trans woman who is female presenting walks into a bathroom, nobody's going to give it a second glance.
Right.
Very few people. At worst, somebody might be like, "Wow, that's a very tall woman." Like it just depends. And there are tall
Right.
women. There are tall women.
There are tall
And
women.
and a trans man that wants to use a men's bathroom, just go to a stall. No one's gonna give you a second glance.
Right.
But it's the insistence on making it policy, I think, is where it all sprang up. Because
Yeah.
if they just left it alone, I don't think anybody really would have given a shit. Like nobody bats an eye when a mother brings her young son into a women's restroom because it's just like, I mean, very young, like not old enough to go by himself.
Right.
Like it's just, listen, we're here to use the bathroom. Like to my knowledge, there aren't like rave parties happening in women's restrooms. So I don't, unless there are, in which case, hey, maybe you want to be in on the fun. I don't know. But to my knowledge, that doesn't happen. So
That doesn't happen.
okay, so I just don't understand it.
That just
But I,
doesn't happen. It's not Glee. You can't.
it's not clear. But like I said, like a lot of things, I think it's the insistence on making it into a law and telling people you have to tolerate this that instantly makes a lot of people not want to tolerate it because they're being told to.
Mhm,
Whereas I think like if you live in a community and you know someone who is trans,
mhm.
like if I knew a trans individual at my job or whatever and this person wanted to use the men's bathroom, I wouldn't give a shit. I wouldn't care. Because again, there's no parties happening in there. It's just it's not that big of a thing, but they've made it a big thing. And each side blames the other for making it a big thing. And I'm just over here
Right.
like, well, you guys did propose the law first, so
It's not our fault that you're kind of being a little bit transphobic with that, but okay.
I don't even remember where that started.
I don't either.
Maybe we should just like find out where that started and then kind of be like, look how ridiculous this is. But at the same time, I can see, especially if you're looking at hypothetical situations, I can see both sides of it. I really
Yeah,
can. But at the end of
right.
the day, I'm over here just like we're talking about using the bathroom.
It's not that big of a deal.
It's not that big of a deal. Just go where, just
Right.
fucking go.
Right.
Like, actually, to punish both sides, we should just implement a policy of all bathrooms being intergender and then just be like, see
Mhm.
what you've done?
Yep. I told my mom, I was just like, you know what? If Trump wins in like 10, like I don't know, in 15 years when I turn 35, I will run for fucking president.
You should. Nobody would fuck with you.
I got a chair. I could ram
Well,
myself
no,
into your knees.
no, I'm just saying you look at him and be like, told you were wrong. No, actually, here's the solution. Just put in European style stalls in every bathroom and just make them gender neutral.
Exactly.
No urinals, no nothing. Just give everybody privacy. End of problem.
Yeah.
See? We just solved the crisis. We solved the issue. It's weird. Why don't stalls go all the way to the ground? It's so
I
odd.
I don't know.
It's so odd. Um, I don't even know how long we've been going. About an hour-ish. Trying to think. So, okay, we covered RFK, we covered So what about Kamala? Do you not like? Because we picked on Trump enough. Now let's hone in on the true evil. I mean Kamala. I don't think she's evil. I'm being hyperbolic. I think she's ignorant. I
See,
don't think she's evil.
I mean, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm like, I mean,
I mean,
um,
kinda.
I'm just totally kidding. Kind of. Not kind of.
I
Mm.
adhere to the Jordan Peterson axiom, who I'm sure he didn't get this himself, but this is who I heard say it is whenever you're looking at something bad in politics or even just anywhere, always assume incompetence before malevolence. Because most things happen because somebody's made a mistake, not so much because they
Mm.
just have evil intentions. Except Hitler, that son of a bitch was evil. Like, that wasn't a mistake, but usually it's because somebody's being a moron. So, but yeah, Kamala, let her have it.
Okay, I will just say this: Kamala is like a halfwit.
See, I'm surprised here coming from you because the vast majority of her voter base just seems enthralled with the fact that she's a woman and she's a racial minority.
She's a woman. Yes, I love that we could have a woman president, but
But
this is the
could we get a
wrong
smart
woman
one?
president.
That I've heard actually so many people say that in private, and most of them would never say it in public. They're like, "Listen, I'd love to have a woman in the White House, just this one." And a lot of people said the same thing about Hillary, by the way, because they were like, "Listen, I'd love to have a woman in the White House, just not her." And by not being with Kamala does not mean that you are not, it doesn't mean that you're sexist or against the idea of a woman being president. It's the whole thing about, um, Disney saying that people didn't like the new Star Wars trilogy because Rey was a woman. It's like, no, we actually, generally speaking, there are some assholes out there that are just like, I don't want no woman in my Star Wars, but it's like, we all loved Princess Leia.
They loved Princess Leia because of the gold bikini. Let's be honest.
I would say no, because she was popular going from the first film. The gold bikini didn't hurt, certainly saw a spike in popularity in the 80s, but no, I think Princess Leia was pretty well beloved since the word go. And then plus you can point out, you know, in the 80s you had your Sarah Connor and your Ripley from the Alien franchise. Like people are not, generally speaking, audiences are not anti women being in leading roles and leading action roles, even though Jennifer Lawrence thinks she was the first one, but I digress. The fact that she said that with a straight face, I was just like, you work in Hollywood. Like you, it's where you work. You should know this. But yeah, so Kamala's incompetent. What else? Because I'm loving this.
That's all I got.
That does seem to be the biggest issue, though, I will say, is Kamala's lack of understanding and the fact that, look, some people are just not good public speakers. Kamala's different because when she's on script, she's fantastic. She can read a teleprompter like Biden wishes he could. Like, when she's on script, she's generally speaking really good. When she's off script, it is painful to watch.
And I will
Like
give her this. I will give her this though. She doesn't call her because now that she's running for president, who's her is
her
it
VP,
yeah, her
Tim
VP
Tim Tim Walls.
Hit Malt. At least um at least she doesn't call Tim Waltz by the wrong name because remember when Biden called Kamala Trump?
Vice President Trump. I love that. That was so great. I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump if she wasn't.
Oh, I cried. I was crying. I was laughing so hard.
Well, and here's the thing about Biden's thing, because everybody screws up a name here and there. It's the thing that happens. But with Biden, it
Yeah,
happened every time he spoke.
yeah, yeah.
It'd be one thing, like it's a flub. And actually, J.D. Vance did one the other day, but he corrected himself like a few seconds later. And believe you me, you're gonna see that clip. And before anybody gives me grief, I'm not a fan of J.D. Vance at all. But I will say you're going to see that clip circulating all around the news media, and they're going to chop off the part where he corrected himself, like literally not even 2 seconds later, because he realized what he did, and then he misspoke and he corrected himself.
I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but are you're talking about the fucks the couch guy? Fucks the couch guy?
I have not looked into that yet. I highly doubt that's accurate, but actually
It's in
next
his
week
book. It's in
is
his
it
book.
okay? I'm gonna
He
have
did it
to
when he
look
was
that.
15.
Oh, okay, yeah. Mm, yeah, I'm talking about the fucks the couch guy then. But next week I'm doing a deep dive on JD Vance, just like I did for Kamala.
Mm.
Um, and as I said in that video, I would do one on Trump, but we've done so many deep dives on Trump, it would just be repetitive at this point. You can go back and watch all the Trump episodes we did back when he was president and when he was going through the court cases. It's been done. And actually, we did an episode where you're graded his presidency too, so you can,
Mm.
that's all out there. So I think next week I'll do JD, and then in a few weeks after that we'll dig into Tim Walz. I was gonna do RFK, but he's not running anymore. So
Don't even remind me of that.
what? Oh, that he's not
That
running.
he's not running anymore.
He's running with Trump. And I will say this much though: the so-called Party of Unity, because remember Biden said he was going to bring the country together, Democrats and Republicans. Gonna bring them together. Need ice cream. Um, Trump has been endorsed in the same week by a leading independent former Democrat and by another former Democrat who was basically not forced out of the party, but became so disenfranchised with their party that she left because she could no longer morally stand with what they are peddling.
Mm.
That's worth noting. That's worth noting that these people are so sickened because RFK Jr. was a former Democrat too. I mean, he was a Kennedy, and they were so sick of what the modern Democratic Party has become that they couldn't stand there anymore. Plus, they wouldn't let RFK run for president in a primary, so he was like, "Fuck you guys,"
Mm.
which I get, but it's worth noting. And I will say this about Trump in his defense. I still maintain that even going back to 2015 when he announced he was running, Trump never got a fair shake in terms of how he was presented in the
Mm.
media, and certainly never as president. Day one, they decided he was Satan incarnate. And I'll be honest, I think that if they hadn't done that huge smear campaign,
Mm.
I certainly think he would have won in 2020. And I still think he would have won had COVID not come around. Um, I think he would have been remembered as one of the better presidents. And what a lot of people will say to that is like, well, yeah, but all the bad stuff. I'm like, all the bad stuff he did was in reaction for whether you believe it was right or not. Most of what he did was in reaction to the smear campaigns that were being perpetuated by the Democrats and the media. Because
Mm.
if he was given a fair shake, he wouldn't have felt like he had to try to overturn. I'm not going to say
Mm.
overturn, allegedly, if that whole thing is true, because the elector scheme, and I'll be honest, I think he did it, but it was based on a fairly dubious theory of the Constitution. But as Eric pointed out to me, after that happened, everybody's like, "Oh no, it was bullshit. He had no authority." But then after it happened, they went in and clarified it under law. So that tells me there might have been something there. But regardless,
Mm.
he wouldn't have done that if, from his perspective, whether it was real or not, the way he saw it, the election was being manipulated. And if they hadn't gone through and changed a bunch of laws in the states, which I think Pennsylvania it still might be illegal, but in some other places completely legal. But the only reason they did that was because it would give the Democrats an edge. And had all that not happened, I don't think January 6th wouldn't have happened. Um, None of the court cases would have happened. I'm totally sure of. None of the court cases would. And then did you see recently Mark Zuckerberg released a letter saying like, "Oh yeah, by the way, they did direct us to censor free speech at Meta."
Really?
Yeah, within the last couple days, came out and said that the Biden administration, and then said that also they admitted to labeling the Hunter Biden laptop story as disinformation based on information they were given by the government, but it turns out the government was lying, and the laptop, in fact, was real, was Hunter Biden's, and yeah, that's still fairly fresh. You could look that up, but yeah, he sent an open letter and just said like, yeah, they absolutely, um, and he said he regretted it. He said we should have stood our ground more, and yeah. Well, and then when Elon Musk released the Twitter files, we all knew that because when he bought Twitter before he renamed it X, which come on, Elon, stop it. If you must have, just name it Twitter X because nobody calls it fucking X.
He just literally picked the letter of the alphabet. That's all he did.
I don't know. He likes the letter X. There's Space X, the Model X from Texas, which by the way, somebody pointed this out to me, and I can't believe I didn't see it. Do you know that the Tesla models all spell out the word sexy? Because you have, I shit you not, you have the Model S, you have the Model 3, which if you turn it the
Yeah,
other way looks like
it's
an
an
E. You have
E.
they have the Model X and the Model Y.
Oh my God.
Somebody pointed that out to me, and I was like, I can't believe I didn't notice that. But anyway, and then I don't know what the Cybertruck fits into that, but I think that's a
Mhm.
separate thing. But yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing that's just so I'm so mad about it that I just laugh now is like the blatant censorship that they still maintain they didn't do. MSNBC just got caught editing a clip of the Joe Rogan podcast, which I watched that episode. I remember him saying this. He was talking about Tulsi Gabbard, and they made it sound like he was talking about Kamala because they edited it together. And they did so as if Joe Rogan wouldn't notice. The man who said it, who has a podcast that gets more viewers than their network, they didn't think he would notice and immediately come out and say, "That's not what I said. Here's what I said." Like, just the absolute hubris of the
It's
left.
just funny that they thought that he's so stupid, but
Well, they also, I remember when he released a video talking about when he got COVID, and he listed out a bunch of the, like therapeutics that his doctor put him on, and one of them was ivermectin. That whole bit. I think it was CNN because he had Sanjay Gupta on to call him out for that. They took
mm,
the clip, they took the video that he posted on social media and colored it so that he looked jaundiced. But the thing is, that clip was on his social media. The original was on Joe Rogan's social media, which again, he has more followers than CNN. So all people had to do was go to Joe Rogan's Twitter page and look at the clip and say, they discolored this. It was obvious. And yet, again, the hubris of the left and the left wing media.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's like we all know Fox News is full of shit, but we actually trusted, the CNNs of the world, and now they're no better,
I
if not
mean,
a little
I
bit
wouldn't
worse.
trust CNN or Fox with a 10-foot pole. Wouldn't touch either of those channels with a 10-foot pole.
I wouldn't either. So generally speaking, if I'm reading a story, I'll read both CNN and Fox News' coverage. Whatever they say that's the same is probably true.
Mm.
Everything else is bullshit. Oh. I don't know. What do you think of Tim Walz? I don't know if you've seen too much of him.
I haven't seen too much of them, and when
Yeah.
I do, I just kind of block them out because I'm like, I don't know, just no.
I get the sense that he's kind of a harmless dork. He is he is fairly radical though, left wing speaking. I mean, he was governor when they were basically burning down cities all over
Mm,
Minnesota. So, I mean, scoreboard.
right. I just I don't know about him. I haven't seen much of him to make my opinion. So,
Yeah, they're not, well, you're not really seeing much of Kamala or Tim Walz in a legitimate, like, certainly not in a way that they're answering tough questions. They've done one interview since she was announced as the nominee. I think it was like 40 days later.
yeah.
Well, and what they're doing is they're trying to keep her out of the public eye long enough for early voting to kick in some states, and then they'll kind of deal with the storm.
Hmm.
Um, Personally, I think, which that debate's coming up. Is it September 10th, the first debate she has with Trump? It's
I
coming.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, she's gonna crumble. It's gonna be glorious.
So my sister's wedding's on the 6th, and my sister and like I don't know if you heard about like how they were talking about having it on the 6th, but then they changed it to the 10th. And my sister was like so worried that it was gonna be on the 6th because I was like, there better not be the fucking debate. I do not want to have people talking about this politics shit on my wedding day.
I feel bad for anybody who's getting married on November 5th. The officiant's gonna be late. He's like, I was in line to vote. I'm sorry.
Oh my god.
I mean that debate is gonna be brutal. It's gonna be brutal.
I'm not gonna be in line anywhere. I get to vote at home.
Oh
I get
yeah,
the
yeah.
mail. I get the mail the mail-in ballot.
But did you have to ask for that?
I had to like each year, each like 4 years, I have to like submit for it. I think I have to
Yeah, okay.
like.
So it's not an unsolicited, because that was my problem. This is why I do think that the 2020 election was stolen, but not in the way everybody else thinks.
Mm.
I had a problem with unsolicited mail-in ballots. I have zero issue with mail-in ballots at all
Mm,
because you have to request it and you have to prove who you are and, you know, da 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 da. You go
mm,
through a process and you request it. Somebody just showing up to an apartment complex and saying, "Here, sign your name here and we'll fill this out for you," which they did because they admitted they did it. It was part of their strategy.
right.
That's wrong. Like that's
Well, and then that's funny you mentioned that because I remember when like 4 years ago, like yeah, like 4 years ago, um, when Biden got turned, was it? No, it was how long ago? What did Biden become president?
in
Was it four
2020.
years?
Yeah, 4 years ago.
2020? Yep, 4 years ago. Okay, so I was right. So 4 years ago, like I remember Trump saying like, "Oh, this was rigged." That like they were like, and then he was talking about how like dead people were like their ballots were being used.
It is worth noting,
Yeah.
my father passed away in 2018,
Yep.
and his voter registration came in the mail in 2020
Oh,
after his
that's
after his death certificate had been filled out in 2018.
eesh.
Hmm.
My God.
I mean, in Indiana, it would have taken a lot of work for me to vote as him, but it's theoretically possible because he was still registered to vote 2 years after he was dead and had the state sanctioned death certificate.
That is wild to me.
Well,
That
actually, you know what? It wouldn't have been that hard because I still had his old driver's license that was not expired, so I would have just had to replace the picture somehow. But it had the barcode and everything that they could have scanned.
that's wild to me.
So I'm just saying, I would never have done such a thing. I would have been too scared to because knowing my luck, my ass would have gotten caught. And frankly, I wasn't worried that Trump wasn't going to take Indiana anyway. But I mean, I'm just saying. So in states that don't have stricter, voter ID laws, if I could have shown up and said, "Yeah, my name's Kim Boger. Here's my signature," I could have absolutely voted as my dead father.
That's insanely wild to me that that could actually happen. So maybe, oh man, okay, now well, now I know owe him an apology then because I thought that that was bullshit.
Well, and the thing of it is, a lot of them seem to be, but now we've seen the governmental apparatus. I mean, it's just, to me, it seems very obvious. Four criminal indictment, well, more than four criminal cases with multiple indictments at federal and state level against one person. You cannot tell me that wasn't politically motivated, even if he did do something wrong. Bill Clinton did shit wrong that was illegal, fraudulent, and he never got indicted because there was a precedent that's like, listen, we're not, unless he kills somebody on the White House lawn, we're not going to go after the president criminally here, especially for white collar crap.
Yep. No, I agree. But then also I'm thinking you say that, and then I'm thinking I just it just popped in my mind that like we've also made it into law that like the president is immune.
So there, okay, so that's another thing that's been horribly misrepresented. It does not exempt any president from criminal activity because, as many people pointed out, they're like, okay, if that's true, Biden's the president, why doesn't he just go to Trump's house and shoot him in the face if he's immune? Because he's not immune from criminal activity.
Right. Okay. Because
That
then I
would
thought he
be,
was.
no, no, not strictly. Now, what it does is it puts the discretion of criminal activity to a certain extent in the judge's hands, but like the president can't go kill people. Like he'll be put in jail in a second. What that really does is it kind of, I kind of jokingly called it the Jefferson loophole, which he really didn't need because nobody batted an eye. But when Jefferson made the Louisiana Purchase with Napoleon, he technically didn't have the authority to do that. So if he had pulled that today under that law, technically, even if Congress had had a problem with it, he could have made the argument that was part of that it was under his official duty as the president and therefore he was immune. However, Congress could still make the argument that no, it wasn't because you didn't have the authority to do that because
Right.
that power had not been granted. It would have become a bit of an arbitration at worst, you know.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but by the same token, if Jefferson walked into the halls of Congress and shot the Speaker of the House in the face, he would have absolutely been arrested and would be today, you know. So,
Mm. Right.
but that's the thing is like Trump's even anybody who thinks that was a victory for Trump is like, well, okay, but all they have to do is prove that your actions as president were illegal, and then you're still in a criminal case. So didn't really get the. It wasn't really that big of a win. Now, not to say that I agree with the spirit of it, because I don't like when any elected official is kind of outside the bounds of the law, even a little bit. But at the same time, I can understand the president needing a certain measure of immunity depending upon what's going on. Because you can't anticipate, and sometimes snappy decisions need to be made, and maybe you don't have time to consult a legal scholar in the moment. I.e., Abraham Lincoln suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War. Now, I wasn't alive then. On paper, I don't agree with it, but I wasn't there. But I think in that instance, I think this is one of the few times I'll admit this. I think the security may have outweighed and people still argue about this. I would have to know what was actually going down on the ground, basically. But I guess like what that really points to, probably a better example would be, like the Bin Laden raid, for example,
Mhm.
which again, nobody had a problem with it. But Barack Obama authorized that raid that ended up killing Obama. Under international law, that may be considered murder, depending on who you ask. Even under
Mhm.
US law, that might be considered murder, depending on who you ask. The
Mhm.
Patriot Act had given him pretty clear authority, but I don't know. You could make the legal case that it was, a murder for hire. And under that statute, there just would have been nobody wanted to, get Obama in trouble over it. Nobody wanted to, accuse him of murder. But under this statute now, nobody could because it was under his official duties as president, and part of his duties as president of the security of the nation. And this is the number
Mhm.
one terrorist who has actually killed many Americans. And I don't think anybody would make the case that this was a bad call. So that's really all that was. Yeah, no, the president doesn't get off scot free because if he did, um, Joe Biden would have been able to do a lot of crap. I think he would have too.
I feel like you would.
I feel like he would have. Oh, but yeah, that's another guy that's never going to be in. He's never going to be indicted. I think it's going to be hilarious though in about 30 to 40 years when all that stuff comes out about what the Bidens were doing in
Mhm.
Ukraine and China and everywhere. I'm going to be like an old man just guffawing, be like, I told you it wasn't bullshit. That'll be funny. Yeah, I gotta say, not that I thought you would be like a Kamala supporter, but I thought you would be a little bit more anti-Trump. But not to say that I'm super duper pro-Trump, but I'll take him over Kamala any day. But I thought you'd be a little bit more anti-Trump, honestly.
I thought so too, and I'm very, very sad and very
Disappointed in yourself.
I'm disappointed in myself.
It's okay. Critical thinking can be difficult at times, I know.
I'm sad now.
I've I'm not even going to say I defended Kamala. I have pointed out that some of the narratives about Kamala that are being perpetuated on social media are in fact not accurate and not true. So like I said, I just want the truth. Like there's the whole bit about her keeping a person in death row and withholding evidence. That is not true. It's kind of true. Let me explain. I can't remember the guy's. I can never remember the guy's name, but he was on trial for murder. He'd been convicted. He was on death row, and then there was a request for additional DNA evidence. Kamala Harris blocked it initially, but the reason she blocked it when she was district attorney was because of the literal mountain of evidence that they used to convict this man. And I read that evidence and I'm like, the fact that they asked for more DNA evidence is a joke. It would have been a
Mhm.
waste of taxpayer money. But later it came up again, and at that time Kamala didn't stand in the way. In fact, she urged then California Governor Gavin Newsom to grant it. It was granted, and it did not exonerate him. He is still on death row,
Mhm.
so still guilty. But that narrative's being perpetuated a lot on social media. I don't think Trump has said it specifically,
Mhm.
but if he has, I'll call him out for that too, because it's like, no, that's just Ben Shapiro did bring that up in his Kamala documentary Scamala, and I'm like, dude, Google is free. This would have taken you 5 minutes to look up and see that the guy's still on death row. It's like, which makes you wonder what else they aren't checking.
Right.
So I did it for you, America. You can watch that episode. That's the Kamala deep dive, where it's just what it sounds like. We do a deep dive on Kamala Harris. It's a very boring episode because honestly, there's just not much there. It's a pretty boring episode. Well, I don't know. Do you have anything else you would like to add politically? Maybe surprise everybody else?
Nope.
Nope, that's it.
Nope.
Well, I completely forgot the sponsorship spots, so I'll do that really quick. Would like to thank our friends at OMG CBD for helping make this podcast possible. And if you are in or around the Columbus, Indiana area, and you have aches, pains, or any need of CBD, also Delta 8, Delta 9, the various paraphernalia necessary, talk to Sasha at OMG CBD, and she can help you out. And then also, if politics isn't your thing, don't worry. We've got a ton of other podcasts, including Hailey's Disney and Broadway podcast, the Part of Your Broadway World podcast. But if you like really nerdy pop culture, I invite you to check out our very good friends at the Spur of the Moment podcast. Every week they do a deep dive on all things movies, TV, tends to have a bit of a nerdy slant, which I personally like. Which, by the way, Haley, if he hasn't already, he's going to invite you on to do an, a special episode where we're going to talk about non-Disney animation studios.
Okay.
And I nominated you for DreamWorks
Okay.
only because DreamWorks only exists because Jeffrey Katzenberg wanted to flip off Michael Eisner.
Okay, that I never even knew. That's hilarious.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's legit. That's legit because what was the role? There was a role that opened up in the company, and it was a big, big title because Michael Eisner was the CEO. And at the time, I think Katzenberg was head of the animation studio or something like that. I'd have
Mm,
to look. But anyway, this position opened up and Katzenberg wanted it. Michael Eisner said no and took the position himself.
mm,
So then Katzenberg said, fuck you, and got together with Spielberg and a couple other people and created DreamWorks, and specifically the animation studio because they wanted to compete with Disney and give them the
mm,
middle finger, which they did for a beat there.
mm.
But it's worth noting that DreamWorks Animation is still the only DreamWorks company still around. So that's a thing that happened. So yes, check out Spur of the Moment every Saturday at approximately 1 p.m. As they say well, they say 11-ish because they're in the Pacific time zone, but they say 11-ish. So yeah, look out for that episode. And thank you guys for enjoying this episode of the Average Intelligence Podcast. Hopefully you're a little bit less average and a little bit more intelligent, but probably not. And I apologize for that. But we will see you guys next week where we'll be doing our deep dive on JD Vance. But until then, Google is free, so look up information yourself.